This quick video will walk you step by step through the process for ethical analysis of a case study. The first step is to make note of every character or stakeholder in the case, and I literally recommend that you take the names of each person and put them at the top of a column. Beneath each of those names, write down the actions of each person. Remember not to note their thoughts, their feelings, or their intentions, because we can only evaluate the specific behavior of the people. Step 2 is to determine the role of each person. People will fit into one of three categories. The first category are the non-professionals. This group will include people such as the client's family, or people in the community, such as neighbors. The other categories will be either CSWs or people from other professions. If you're not sure whether somebody fits into another profession, you should look it up by doing some research. The next slide describes some of the things you consider when you want to know whether somebody fits into another profession. Let's review the 4 things that make a person a professional. Number 1, professions have a standardized education. What this means is that even if you took your education in Abbotsford versus, let's say, Vancouver, you would get the same basic education anywhere within the region of that profession. Number 2, professions have a code of conduct. Sometimes it's called a code of ethics or a code of principles. But the basic idea is that somebody has written down all of the rules or all of the principles that cover that profession, and they're usually made available to the entire public so that everybody can hold people in that profession accountable. Number 3, there's usually an organization known as a professional association or professional body that oversees the profession, and they're particularly responsible for item number 1 and number 2. They make sure that all the educators in the field are giving a standardized, high-quality education. They make sure the public is aware of the code of conduct, and they enforce the code of conduct if somebody complains. Number 4, professions are accountable to the entire community. They hold a position of trust in the community. And not every person who works in a career can say that they have a degree of accountability to the entire community. When we go out, for example, to a restaurant, the way that restaurant behaves towards us as customers is of concern, but may not be necessarily of concern to everybody in the community. By comparison, professions like medicine, such as doctors and nurses, law, such as judges and lawyers, and teachers are all examples of professions. They have all 4 of these criteria. You must have a certain type of education. You must abide a code of conduct. You must be a member of a professional association. And the reason that all of those things matter is that the entire community cares how you do your job, not just the people who you immediately serve in the moment. Now, CSWs are in a unique category called paraprofessionals, and that's because we don't have a standardized education. There are some people working, particularly in remote areas of our province, who don't have much education at all still. We also don't have a widely agreed upon code of conduct. I teach you the principles that I have come to understand through my work and my research, but there isn't one unified place that everybody has agreed upon where these things have been written down and can be enforced, and neither is there a professional association. That makes our job somewhat difficult, and that's part of the reason why it's so important to us as a college to have you graduate with a strong sense of these principles and the ability to use an analytical process. Step 3. Now that we have identified who the professionals and paraprofessionals are, we want to focus only on those people. The non-professionals, such as family, clients, and neighbors, simply cannot behave unethically because ethics only apply to professionals. Yes, those people can violate laws, or they can violate social rules such as manners, but because the question in this case is only about ethics, once you realize that somebody is not a professional, you can stop worrying about them. They have not behaved unethically. Step 4, and I can't emphasize step 4 enough. This whole process requires you to have a comfortable and thorough understanding of the principles that apply to CSWs. And if there are other professionals in the case, you'll need to do some research and understand what principles apply to them. It's a mistake to assume that other professionals have the exact same principles as CSWs. There may be some overlap, but there will always be some differences. And in some cases, there may be significant differences. So it's important to go back and review the principles. Make sure that you understand them clearly and carefully. And as you go through the case, you'll want to make sure that you do this whole process in a thorough and slow way, because if you rush it, you're very likely to make a mistake. There are 2 steps for doing this. Step 5 is to check to see if the professionals met their standards. In other words, did they do all of the things they were required to do according to their code of conduct? Remember, a standard doesn't mean that a person has done their work at a really high level, just that they have done the minimum thing that they were required to do. If they didn't, if not, then you must name what they should have done. And you need to name the principle that they violated through their inaction. Explain how they didn't meet the standard. Here's an example. If a staff person neglected to fill out an incident report after an accident, they would be violating the principle of accountability, because that principle says they are supposed to provide accurate and up-to-date records. Remember that if a person has violated even one standard, in other words, if they haven't met even one standard, we can say there is unethical conduct. Step 6 is to check and see if the professionals violated any ethics. What this simply means is, did they do anything they should not have done? Did they misbehave? If so, again, we're going to name what they did and the principle it violates. And we're going to explain how that action violated the principle. Here's an example. If a staff person falsified an incident report, we could say they violated the principles of accountability and integrity. Why? Because they're supposed to be transparent, that's accountability, and they're supposed to be honest and trustworthy. Lying isn't any of those things. Again, as soon as we can say that a person did something that violated one principle, we can say that they did something unethical, and that will affect what we do about it. After you have reviewed steps 5 and step 6, it's entirely possible you may come to the conclusion that no principles were violated. In other words, you may see no examples of people behaving in a way that was explicitly improper, and you may see no missed required steps. When that happens, you're talking about a difference in practice, not unethical conduct. You may feel strongly that there was a better way for a person to behave, but stop short of accusing them of violating a principle or breaking a rule. This is a pivotal decision, because what you do next depends a great deal on the conclusion you reach to this question. We obviously do not want to falsely accuse people of unethical behavior, because it could damage their career and their reputation. At the same time, we don't want to miss any unethical behavior, because doing so could cause harm to the people we support and to the larger community. So getting this right really matters. Once we've reached a conclusion, we're ready for step 7. No matter what conclusion we reach, in general, step 7 has us take some sort of action and to advocate for the best possible services we can provide. If we reach the conclusion that a person's behavior is unethical, there are specific steps we must take. The first is we must ensure the safety of anybody who might be in harm's way. That could include the people we support, other workers, or the community as a whole. Next, we document whatever we saw. It might mean recording things with pictures or taking notes. We want to make sure our documentation is objective, complete, done properly, and done promptly. Number 3, we want to report whatever we've seen and supply that documentation to a person in authority. This means somebody who has the position of authority sufficient to act on this problem. It could be your supervisor, the police, or the Ministry for Children and Families, all as examples. And it could be all of those people in some scenarios. Number 4, we must maintain confidentiality. This means that other than telling those people in authority, we protect the information from anybody else. Again, we don't want to make anybody go through a process of having their career or reputation sullied or ruined by information being leaked. Number 5, we want to follow up. We're not likely to get told exactly what happens. In some cases, it may be very evident to us, but in other cases, we may not be able to tell exactly what's happened. we're still able to follow up and ask some basic questions of the person in authority. Did you get my report? Did you act on my report? Those are questions we should ask. And number 6, if anything else happens, we want to report it too, whether it was the same person as the first time or somebody else. What if it's just a practice difference? Here, the basic idea is that we're going to speak directly to the person or people with whom we might have some disagreement. But we're going to do that in a collaborative practice. We might have a private conversation, one-to-one. We might ask them questions and find out whether or not there's a good reason for their difference in practice. We might ask to have the item brought to a staff meeting or some other meeting. And if we're not sure what to do, it's always a good idea to get guidance from a supervisor. One don't is to make sure we don't engage in any lateral conversations. In other words, we're only going to talk to the person that's directly involved or get advice from that supervisor. We're not going to go to a peer, another person who's at the same level as us on the team, and share our thoughts and feelings. Even though that might feel good to do in the moment, that's gossip, and that is distinctly unprofessional behavior on our behalf. What if we don't take action? What if we don't respond appropriately? If we have witnessed unethical behavior and we don't report it, we become unethical ourselves because we're violating the principles of advocacy and safety. And even if we reach the conclusion that what we've seen is simply a matter of practice, we have a duty to try and improve the practices where we work to the utmost degree. So that means advocating, collaborating, and consulting with both coworkers and other experts or stakeholders, including the client, him or herself. So we're never going to simply do nothing. Perhaps we are going to learn something from our colleagues and change our practice based on what we hear from them. But any way you slice it, we're going to do our job better as a result of managing what we've seen. Here's a flowchart to help wrap up and summarize this video. The first things we did were assess what actually happened in the case, who did what. After we did that, we determined what the roles of people were. We ruled out any person who wasn't a professional as being unethical, because only professional people can have unethical behavior. Next, we carefully reviewed the principles that applied. If they were CSW principles, we applied them to CSWs. If they were another profession, we went and researched the principles that applied to those professions and applied it to our case. We asked 2 basic questions. Did the professionals involved do everything they were required to do? And did they do anything they should not have done? If we found examples of either of those things, we named the action or inaction, we described what it looked like, and we explained how it amounted to a violation of a principle. We gave our reasoning. After doing that, we acted depending on what we found out. If the behavior of the person was found to violate a principle, we said that it constituted unethical conduct. We acted to protect the safety of the people who might be in harm's way. We documented what we saw, and we reported it to a person in authority. If we found that there was a difference in practice, we were collaborative with the other stakeholders. We consulted them, including other professionals, and the people we serve, so that we provided the best possible service we could. Hopefully this video has helped you to simplify the process of analyzing real-life cases and case studies. And I hope it's also helped you to understand the importance of doing this work in a slow, systematic way. With practice, you'll get better at doing this more quickly, but don't rush it now. And don't simply go on the way you feel about things. That's unreliable and will probably cause you to make mistakes or to miss things. Get good at doing analysis, and you will serve the people that you are aiming to support more effectively over the course of your career.